Anyone who has read the Quran knows that it contains primarily stock characters. Stock characters are stereotypical, predictable figures which do not have to be developed to be understood by the reader. This is why nearly all of the Quran's major characters are portrayed as submissive slaves of Allah, with hardly a sin on their record. The doctrine of infallibility of the prophets in its various forms also developed relatively early in Islam to supplement the portrayal of the Quran's stock characters. This is, of course, why many Muslims have so much trouble with the Bible. They can't seem to understand that the Bible does not contain stock characters. Rather, the Bible presents people as they really are. The Quran presents people as it wants them to be. When we look at the Quran, we see plenty of examples of it recreating historical figures in its own ahistorical image, thus creating these stock characters. Here are just a few examples. In Surah 2:129, Abraham prays for a messenger who will recite signs, teach the book and the wisdom, and purify. Later in the Quran, Muhammad is conveniently described in precisely the same way. The Quranic accounts of Abraham and the idolaters have some vast differences, but in one of them, the hatred Muhammad had for the idolaters is read back into Abraham's life, as portrayed in later rabbinic legends, where Abraham is said to have served as a good example with enmity and hatred toward his people. This is just a small sample of how the Quran presents its stock characters to the reader. But for those familiar with Jesus' kind and peaceful teaching in the Gospels, as well as the peaceful spread of the early persecuted Christian church, you may be somewhat surprised that the Quran reads its violent ideology back onto Jesus and the Gospel. Jesus is recast to parallel the ideology of Muhammad, who was harsh against the disbelievers. Surah 9:111 explains the good news of a bargain with Allah, where Muslims are rewarded for fighting and killing. Further, the Quran contains a garbled suggestion that the disciples would apparently battle their enemies as well. If we look some more at the subject of fighting in the Quran, we see that the Quran describes fighting with every prophet, without exception. And though fighting is commanded, it may be hateful for some, though it is good for the believers. In a couple of disturbing verses in Surah 9, Allah brings the good news that rage in one's heart can be soothed with violence. Violence for the Quran is the appropriate solution for rage. And of course, fighting is one way you can earn Allah's love. The anthropology of the Quran is further expounded in Surah 91. Here the Quran states that Allah instills depravity into the human soul. You can compare with apologetic translations like Daif International, which change the meaning drastically with additions in brackets. About this, Gordon Nickel comments, "This wording is a good example of how translator A.J. Droge provides a straightforward translation, while most Muslim translators interpret the words to bring them in line with Islamic teaching." Mark Dury comments that Surah 91:7 and 8 reports that Allah fashioned the soul and inspired it, not only with its righteousness, but also with its depravity. Likewise, Iblis, when claiming a divine assignment to be one who sits in wait for people to lure them off the right path, declares that he does this because Allah has caused him to go astray. This is consistent with the often repeated statement that Allah is responsible for people's guidance and misguidance. There is a potential theological tension apparent between the two emphases that Allah does not intend evil, yet He is the one who inspires evil and leads people astray. In spite of the Quran's largely whitewashed portrayal of its main characters, it does have a negative anthropology the rest of the time. Allah has instilled depravity into the heart. The believers are in a rage, and the good news is that the rage may be removed when they fight at Allah's command, following in a long tradition of Allah's fighting prophets. It is through this lens that the Quran sees Jesus, who in reality preached a peaceful gospel and called his followers to do the same. Indeed, if Jesus commanded fighting, then his followers completely misunderstood him. The word fight only occurs once as a command in the New Testament in a figurative context. Fight the good fight of the faith. Yet in spite of this, as we've seen, the Quran reads its propensity for violence, fueled by rage, back onto previous prophets and books. including Jesus and the Gospel. If we ask what historical Jesus and Gospel the Quran is talking about, Muslims will have a difficult time explaining. The Jesus in the Quran is largely a warlord. He's recreated in Muhammad's image, though superior to Muhammad in many ways, since the Quran was not able to rid itself of the apocryphal legends about Jesus, though of course it had no trouble remaining nearly entirely ignorant of the earlier canonical Gospels. If we were to ask what effect this ideology of rage and violence has on a person, unfortunately, some Muslims have been showing us the answer. Some of the following clips contain profanity.
But then you have Muslims say, I've got doubts, I don't know, and this can't be quiet. Have some guts, be a man. Stop being the slave of the Orientalists. Come on, it's an inferiority complex. Wallahi, some people have been calling me and giving me some emails. Brother, I have doubts. What doubts, man? What embarrassment is that? Why you have doubts? Why?
So you wetback piece of shit, go fuck yourself. Do you understand? You will be found.
It is public information, but it wasn't intended for
Did
you.
you just say you will be found? Did he literally just say that you will be found?
You will be found, full stop. Hold on, Yassi.
Ijaz, you are a disgusting pig. You are a dog, dude. You are a pure dog. You are a filthy dog, dude.
It's next. I want you to know something, Ariel. I want you to know something, Ariel.
Right.
This kind of behavior, insulting threats, I don't like.
Next.
Ijaz is doing this. Ijaz is doing this to create a certain situation. Okay, I don't think you realize that he's not doing it to make you feel as if somebody's going to come and shoot you. I don't even think you should have done it anyways, right? However, you need
people like you, little weaklings, who leave their religion and cause corruption in the land by spreading it. The capital punishment in Islamic law would be applied to you. We have no doubt, and we're proud of that. And we, you know what, we'll be watching.
Imagine how different these people would be if they exchanged the Quran's gospel of rage for the true gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, whether or not this actually happens, at least we know the root of their problem. See you next time.